Welcome back, everyone, to Over the Loudspeaker. This is season 2 of our YouTube show podcast, moving to all spaces of the media sphere. I'm Nestor, your host, joined by Colin from the Hayward Herald. This is
They
a
said it
Hayward
wouldn't
Herald
happen.
show. They said it wouldn't happen. They doubted us, Colin. Can you believe that?
I
Why would
mean,
they do such a thing?
it's only been 5 months. Come on.
Yeah, it's been a while. We haven't seen each other since the last time we recorded. It's been so long. Actually, no, we've seen each other a couple of times. Actually,
We haven't,
a lot of times, actually.
but it's fine. We haven't seen each other in this format since then.
That's true. We haven't seen each other in this format. So there's plenty to talk about. I hope folks are ready for more content. We're going to try to deliver it at a regular basis, especially during the winter months when you're maybe bunkered down in your house. You need something to stream, to listen to. Well, I have the goal of moving us not only to have us on YouTube, but also to move us into audio format so that folks who don't want to just watch two heads on a screen can listen to two heads in your earphones. That makes sort of sense.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
So that's where we're headed. And we're going to hopefully have some good topics in the next few months to talk about and to bring you more information, bring you news, bring you the latest with what's happening in Hayward. And with that said, we're going to turn to our headlines. Colin.
All right. Hello,
Take it away.
everybody. It's November 2025 already, so let's cover some headlines. We're going to start with a summer recap. During the summer of 2025, the City Council may have taken time off, but the news did not stop. Very briefly, the Herald covered the city's military equipment use policy, the tree preservation ordinance and what that means for residents, why it took so long for HUSD to approve a Pride Month resolution, a 3-part deep dive into the Hayward Sun Gallery, and residents turning out to support keeping the former SkyWest Golf Course an open, wild space. We also saw some of you at the Hayward Night Market and handed out copies of our zine, both at the summer and at the autumn night markets. And we kicked off our Hayward Voices speaker series. And if you have no idea what any of that means, check out our Substack and learn more. Moving on, we're going to cover public outcry against the dispensary. A group of concerned residents from both Hayward and Castro Valley spoke out against the proposed cannabis dispensary slated to fill the old Walgreens location on Foothill and Grove. Speakers cited the attached judo dojo, children walking past, and proximity to Garden of Eden as reasons to deny the permit. However, city staff and the Hayward Police Department stressed that the dispensary is allowable in the location and meets all security criteria. The majority of the Planning Commission voted not to recommend approval for the dispensary, though the final decision lies with the City Council. And given that the only existing dispensary, Cookies, provides close to $1 million a year in tax revenue for the city, it may be more popular with the council than expected. Next, we have HUSD budget updates. Despite cutting $50 million from its budget in February, HUSD will still need to cut an additional $11 million this year in order to balance their budget. This comes despite good news from the last fiscal year that maintained the state-mandated 3% reserves, but the deficit comes from both spending more than the district was taking in, as well as using $5 million of one-time funding to support 27 employees. The district will conduct town halls throughout the months of November and December to gather community feedback, with translation available in Spanish, Mandarin, and Farsi. We'll be reporting more on HUSD's budget in the coming months. And speaking of budget, there's some budget deficit fallout. During the September 2nd City Council meeting, members of the City Council revealed that Hayward is facing a surprise $30 million deficit due to decisions made by previous executive leadership. This has resulted in a number of austerity measures that directly impact our community. A rental registry, which would allow the city to enforce existing renter protections, was put off for at least a year due to staffing costs. Community services funding was entirely withdrawn, removing city support for local nonprofits, including small business support, arts and music programs, and housing and food services. Members of the executive team have taken a 4% furlough, aside from the police chief, but that only saved around $122,000. The city has been in negotiations with all labor groups for weeks, and that is ongoing. And despite the rising fascism and market forces strangling local news, we're not stopping anytime soon. So if you would like to learn more about these headlines and support what we do, please subscribe to the Hayward Herald at haywardherald.substack.com. The Hayward Herald is your only source of independent Hayward news delivered to your inbox at least twice a week. Please subscribe and share our stories with your friends, family, and neighbors.
I came in a little late with the ticker, I will say. Just to say, came in a little late. I recognize when, you know,
Okay.
I'm not, it's been a while since we've been in this space. I was like, where's the button for the, anyway. There it is.
I still love it.
Subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already subscribed. Colin, you mentioned a couple of things in your headlines that we're going to go into a little bit more depth. The first thing is that we were at the Hayward Night Market. That was not that long ago. And we had not just one zine for folks to grab, but now we have two zines that folks can check out. And the second zine, I mean, I'm a little biased here because I worked on the art, but I think it's pretty wonderful. If you ask me, I think it's a beautiful piece of work. It's much different from our first zine that was a little bit more DIY. I feel like this is a legit publication here that we put together. Of course, most of it is your work here, Colin, but we have some great photographs. We have some great art, great story on Big Lou, featuring art by Big Lou, and some more art by yours truly, covering some of the hits, I would say, from the Hayward Herald in the past. What does this cover? Past couple of months, Colin?
I think like 2 or 3 months, maybe.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So there it is. We will provide the link in the description so that you're able to check that out if you haven't already checked it out. And are folks still able to get copies of this?
Yes, we have about 40 copies more. I know we're looking to try and distribute those to some local businesses. Things have been really busy in October, so we haven't been able to do that yet. But it's ongoing. And if nothing else, I'll do what I did last time and just dump it all at Books on B, and you can find it there. So that'll be my fallback plan. But hopefully, we'll distribute to some maybe in the Tennyson corridor, just to try and expand our reach and get into other places, since that's right close by where the night market happened, which was fantastic.
Yeah, cool. So you talked a little bit about the city of Hayward being in a little bit of a budget deficit, a little tiny bit.
I mean, I think considering, what was it? I think Ray Bonilla threw out the B word for bankruptcy. Of like, we are fending off bankruptcy. Like, this is enormous. This is huge.
Yeah. $30 million. Is that right?
Yep, $30 million set to use up the entire reserve. And literally, we just did a piece doing a deep dive into the budget for the last 10 years. And if they don't figure something out soon, they're going to not be able to make payroll this year. So it's pretty bad.
I think $30 million is enough to maybe pay for like the lab in the new Frankenstein movie. Sorry, I had to sneak it in there. I just watched it last night. I was really excited about it. It's a piece of art.
There's another Frankenstein movie?
There's another Frankenstein movie by Guillermo del Toro, but this isn't the main subject of today's episode. We're talking about the budget. We're talking about $30 million deficit. Colin, break it down for us, because your article did such a great job of covering what is the source of this deficit. And it seemed like part of it is, well, most of it is paying for staff. Who the city employs is a big part of this deficit. But there's also maybe overtime related costs, in particular with one department. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the city right now is, cities provide services, and services come from people. So it's very common for cities to use between 70 and 85% of their budget on staffing and benefits. So that's normal. This past year, the city spent 95% of their budget on salaries and benefits, which is way beyond what it should be. And in looking at the budget to actuals, the issue is that the fire department is spending a lot on overtime. Obviously, fire, very important. I very much support the fire department, but because of some of the things that they do with like minimum staffing levels and their union negotiations and their contract, and also because of how the budget was done by people who can seem to leave just before this became a problem.
Not suspicious at all, by the way. I'm just like, yeah.
No, it's just a thing that you do right before the shoe drops. You just happen to get a job in San Leandro. It's weird, where things are definitely going fine.
Yeah, there's no city council member who's been arrested by the federal government.
No, there's no problems in San Leandro. It's very quiet there. But so the fire department went like $10 million over their budget just because of overtime costs. So they've been spending a lot of it. The police department also went over, but the not nearly so bad because their budget was actually fine. The reason it happened is because in 2019, they reduced the overtime budget for the fire department from around $2.5 million to less than $500,000, which sounds insane because they were regularly spending $2 to $3 million on staffing. But due to some stuff that we elaborate on in the story, and we can talk about if you want, but the basically that was never changed. There was a good reason to bring it down, and then it was never changed. So their budget for overtime has been flat for the last 6 years, and their overtime has gone up because of obviously cost increases, inflation, and also just because they've been taking on a lot of special assignments with, doing lots of stuff because they're paramedics, they're fire, they have time, people like them, they're not armed. It's very, very good to get them to do things. But when every single thing you do causes overtime, it gets expensive really fast. That's why the HMET program had to be canceled, because it was funded basically through fire department overtime.
Yeah, and it seems like, at least I recall reading in your article, that overtime is a big piece of it, but it's not it's not simply the overtime, but because I think it was somewhere that you have a quote maybe from the city manager saying that at least it was $2 million of, I don't remember if that was just for the fire department or if it was for all staff as a whole, but that everything went up, including overtime. So I was sort of trying to get a sense of like, okay, so some things weren't accounted for, but it seems like a very huge oversight by, who does this fall on? Now we have a bunch of new staff in the city that are sort of like going to have to fall on the sword for some of this maybe, but where does this ultimately sort of lie, or who's ultimately accountable for this?
Right now, unfortunately, nobody's accountable. It's just everyone scrambling to try and patch holes. And it fell on the people who appeared to be responsible, who signed off on these budgets and put them forward for years, is the former finance director, Dustin Clausen, who became the assistant city manager and then acting city manager for a while before he left for San Leandro. And then there was, I believe she was a finance officer who then became the finance director. I forget her first name. It's Miss Gonzalez. I don't remember her first name off the top of my head, but it's in the article. And yeah, she, both of them signed off on these budgets every time. It was everything managed to cover all of those expenses. At the end of the day, I know a lot of staff in other departments are really good about finding grants and other ways of shuffling money around to make sure that the city stayed afloat. But between that and also some very generous raises that the city council gave last year, as well as some peculiarities in the police and fire contracts, things got really out of hand this year. It just kind of exploded.
Yeah. And I imagine as they go back to sort of renegotiate some of those contracts, the unions that represent those workers are going to say, or at least this would be my perspective if I was in charge of those negotiations, that this is your problem to figure out, not ours. You're the ones that should know how much money you have to, right? And that's why we both come to the table to negotiate. Like, You know, I imagine they're going to have a hard time they're going to willingly give up concessions when this is maybe the city's fault.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the unions are well within their rights, as everyone on the city has said that like we have contracts doing this, and if we cannot meet these obligations, we are invalidating these contracts. We are liable for copyright violation or for contract violations.
Yeah.
The downside is that, I mean, it all depends, like in any of these situations where like, are you going to think collectively or are you going to think individually? Because yeah, you might be able to keep the sweet 5% raise or more that you wind up getting, but they're gonna have to cut people if you're not going to make concessions. So I know this was a similar issue that was faced at the CSUs during the financial downturn in 2008 and 9, that like the faculty for the entire CSU system wound up voting, and whether it was we're going to make big cuts or we're going to furlough to try and keep everybody. And that furlough vote only barely passed. Like 51% of people voted for that, is my understanding. So something similar could happen here. Obviously, anything about the negotiations is behind closed doors and very hush hush right now. I've only heard rumors that I cannot share, but it does sound like there are probably going to be certain groups who are going to have to take a lot of convincing in order to give up a pretty solid raise that the city said they could cover.
Yeah, and it's a hard time to give up a raise, right? With the cost of living going up and the state of things in the world, you know, not just in the economic side, but in general, right? With SNAP benefits and all those things, sort of. So it's a tough time to say like, yeah, let me give up the raise that I got, as you know, as someone who is part of a union. I could imagine that won't go well. But there are pots of money or potential revenue sources. I know you talked a little bit about the cannabis revenue, maybe exploring raising the business tax. Do you want to say more about either one of those?
Yeah. So obviously there are two levers you can do to balance your budget. You can either cut costs or you can increase revenue. And the city doesn't have a lot of revenue levers. The ones that were mentioned during the last budget and finance meeting were the cannabis tax was mentioned because, again, as mentioned in the headlines, like one cannabis business floats almost $1 million a year in taxes, and that's not just from their cannabis tax, but also from sales tax and property tax. They pay a lot, and there's another one that's looking to come in, and although the certain subset of the community might be against it, and when you're talking taking around a good chunk of your adding a good chunk of revenue, it's going to look pretty good for the city council to maybe okay that. And then the business tax is also something that they eyed at, they made a mention of, just because it hasn't been touched in a long time. The revenue has gone up, but not a huge amount. It's mostly been because more businesses have been coming in, not because they've raised the tax at all. It hasn't been touched in a long time, according to city staff. So that's something to consider. Also, unfortunately, they're going to have to dip into Measure C money, which is not something, especially Mayor Salinas was very happy about at all. He was really adamant that, like, if the city messes with Measure C, it could ruin any kind of revenue measure going forward, because it was not meant to pay for salaries. It was always meant to pay for just infrastructure stuff. Like, we got the library from it. We're potentially getting a new police HQ from it, all this stuff. But it has money and it earns good money. And they are sure that right now, if they leave it, it's going to have extra money in it and it can plug that hole in the short term. But the mayor and other members of council really want it structured as a loan so they can pay that back and not make it seem like they're just like pulling from it because it's an extra set of cash around. But the city's going to need it to keep paying the bills.
Yeah, I was looking into Measure C once I read that and saw the comment from the mayor, because I was sort of like, well, I guess, yeah, if it's not intended as a rainy day fund, but it essentially, like, if you're not spending it right, in the moment, because if I pulled up the language for Measure C, and it says, city council submitting to the voters a question of whether approve yada 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 to fund city services and facilities, such as improving police protection, updating fire stations, repairing streets and potholes, replacing the main library, and other general city services and facilities. So it reads as an infrastructure, like it's primarily for infrastructure, but I think the other general city services is kind of like, it covers it, right? So, and if you're saying our city is in a crisis, and you explain this is a one-time thing in which we, to me, I mean, it probably, I don't have a finance background, so I'm maybe the last person to be speaking about this sort of thing. But it seems to me that you have a pot of money that you can dip into. Yeah, maybe you don't want to spend the entire thing, but it's sort of, that's what savings accounts are for, right? An emergency comes up, you sort of you have money to cover it. I mean, the question is, for those who are in charge politically, like, do they expect to go back to the voters to ask for more money? Or, so it's like, what is the downside of dipping into these funds, unless there's an intention to go and ask for more money in the future? I'm not sure if I see the connection there.
Yeah, so I think the reason is that there's, like, this is the main way that the city has used in recent history to pay for any big building. Like, we don't have, like, in the past with, like, this building behind me here, the city had savings and money, and they saved up, and they had that money up front, and they bought it just like you would buy anything else. But with, the financialization of everything that's been going on, now they basically do a revenue measure, or they take out a big loan. They do a bond measure, which HUSD does a lot of, which is basically you're selling bonds that are guaranteed by taxpayer money. And so there's interest on it, and there's all this other stuff. And with I don't know exactly how revenue measures work, but I know that is functionally different from a bond in that it doesn't count as debt. So the city actually doesn't carry very much debt right now compared to its budget. And so I think they want to keep it that way. But if they ever do any big spends again, they're going to want to have to go back and do, they just recently extended Measure C instead of getting a new one, so that they can pay for the new police HQ and maybe some other things. But in order to get it passed, to make it easier, because you could do like a parcel tax, but that takes that's a much higher threshold to pass by the voters. That's like a 2/3 majority you need to pass. Whereas, like, for this one, where it goes into the general fund, and we just, like, council just, like, pinky swears that they're going to what they're going to do with it, but it is general fund money on the books, that only needs like a 50% threshold to pass, which is way easier. And so that's what they've done with Measure C and with Measure K1, which extended it, is it goes into the general fund, but it is earmarked internally for these things. And some of those are services. It's paid for some police positions and some maintenance positions, which are really important. But it was never meant to pay for like a lot of staffing. But it's there, and it's kind of an emergency. But they're going to need to do it again. And there's a lot of talk about like losing the trust of the voters. And having talked to some people who have been around for a while about certain budgetary things, there are certain folks out there who definitely remember. And I think they could get really noisy about it if something like that happens.
Yeah. Maybe there's a future infrastructure podcast down the road here. I'm like thinking, for those who are really like fired up by this conversation right now, they're like, yeah, give me more. I need more infrastructure talk.
Oh my God. Don't tempt me with a good time, Nestor.
Let's cap the budget talks there. I think, I recommend that if you want to learn more about the ongoing budget issues, you turn to the Hayward Herald. Colin is churning the articles out. There's this latest piece on the budget I thought was really good and sort of broke it down. And I left away thinking like, hey, I know what the hell's going on with the budget. I can get on this podcast and talk to Colin about it. So that was great. Thanks, Colin. Thanks for all your work.
The dream.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the ongoing crisis that's happening in our communities, especially in our immigrant communities, around ICE raids and the militarization that we're seeing in cities all across the country, and the potential of that militarization coming home to the Bay Area. And there was just this past month in October, there was going to be this huge border patrol operation that was going to come to the Bay, specifically to San Francisco, and there was huge mobilization that was happening the week of. Folks were meeting online. There was, rapid response networks that were being built up, literally being built up. Besides the ones that are funded by the county, the ASSILEP line, and the operation was intended to, I was reading an article. I forget where exactly. It might have been a KTVU article that talked to. They had a unnamed agent who chose to remain anonymous, who talked about that the plan was that these, I think it was 200 members of the Border Patrol that were going to be doing sort of, lack of a better word, sort of intel gathering, right? Information gathering, and locate spots that they can then hit up. And the word on the at the time was that they were going to be looking at places like Home Depots, places where immigrants, day laborers, vulnerable folks hang out, look for work, or are working, right? And that was going to be the target over the days that were going to follow. Of course, that plan was called off, thanks to our president, who received, or I guess thanks to our, not to our president, thanks to our billionaire overlords, at least as was reported. Colin, I don't know if you saw that news about supposedly Trump got on the phone with some of the billionaires based here in the Bay Area, and that they convinced him to call the operation off. How much of that do you believe? Do you believe any of that?
I actually do believe that, because who else would he listen to, number one? And also Mayor Daniel Lurie, who is himself a billionaire, part of the Levi Strauss fortune, is my understanding. Plus, I know there was a big like Oracle conference or something going on right around that same time. And so like that would obviously be really bad PR for someone, a wealthy billionaire like a Larry Ellison type, who's like flying in people from all over the world for this enormous conference, and then it's like militarized everywhere. That's not a good look. So I actually do kind of buy it, and I don't think this is the kind of people we should be relying on to save us in times of crises.
Yeah, and as I hear you sort of talk about it, it does sort of make sense if you're looking at it from like a PR perspective, or like you're trying to keep business as usual in the Bay Area. My other thought was like, I think they saw what was going on in Chicago. They saw what was happening in LA, in places even like Portland, which, aren't these like massive I mean, I guess in Portland isn't like a massive response as I think the administration was expecting, because I think there is a little bit of like, let's show force so that then there's a response so that we can double down. I think that's clearly, I think, a tactic that this administration is sort of using. But I also think that they were seeing what was happening, the response in LA initially, the response in Chicago, which is still going, right? There's still people being kidnapped, and people are still out and responding to those, to that activity that's being taken place by ICE. And I think that, they thought maybe a third front in the Bay Area in terms of the response. I got to give credit to our folks here in the Bay. Like, I think the fact that people were organizing, as soon as they heard the news, people were ready at the Coast Guard Island between Oakland and Alameda to respond to the deployment, right? Like, people were ready to go. And I think if we just remember the days of Occupy, right, where the Bay Area, like everyone was doing Occupy all across the country, and where was the center of action was in Oakland, right? It was just like, it was in the Bay Area. There's this great Jon Stewart clip from The Daily Show where he's like, "Oh, Occupy," and they're showing clips of all the different places. It's all peaceful, and then they go to Oakland, and he says, "What the hell is happening in Oakland?" Right? And so that's as someone who was involved in the sort of rapid response piece, I felt like, okay, people are super, super aware of what's happening, ready to go, also like ready to go hit the streets, respond to people's needs. And so I think there was that potential to really escalate and with the potential of exploding. And I don't know if the administration was ready for it. Not that the administration cares, So I think there's probably truth in all of these things, right? In the thought that the billionaires sort of called it off, or that or that Trump was ready to escalate and maybe didn't want to overdo it with already the action in different cities, right? I don't know. Like, one question that I think I have that I don't know who has the answer for. Maybe some journalists can look this up. Is like how as they're hiring people, like, what is the reality of like what that work, I don't have a better word to put it, but that workforce looks like in terms of immigration enforcement, because I know that they have provided all these bonuses. They're looking to hire like crazy. They've gotten rid of the age requirements, but what does it realistically look on the ground in terms of, I would say like boots on the ground per people that they're, trying to corral and kidnap and whatnot. So anywho, these are the questions that I've sort of been thinking about a lot and sort of just trying to wrap my head around. But there has been some reported activity, at least in our part of the Bay Area. Over this weekend, the ASILEP line, which is the Alameda County Immigration Education Project. Is that what that stands for?
Legal
education keyword
and
there.
Legal. Yeah.
Yeah, ASILEP. Yeah, Legal Education Project. They sent out an alert. If you're not on their rapid response network, and you're interested in getting involved, you can go to a training and they'll sign you up to their rapid response network, where you will get text blasts and show up to do that sort of important work of monitoring ICE activity and also doing that reporting, right? So it's sort of a two-way channel. But they confirmed that there was ICE activity, ICE agents in unmarked vehicles in the Fremont area of Sundale, which I actually am not too familiar with Fremont or the Sundale area. So I don't really know where that is in kind of position to the city. I don't know if it's further away from us or closer to us in terms of the city boundaries, but they were doing what they call knock and talks, which I think is where they're going house to house looking for folks. And looking for specific individuals with voluntary cooperation. So there was a whole effort to turn people out this past weekend. We're recording on November 9th, right? So this literally yesterday, and I think that maybe even the day before, people were where there was an alert went out. People went out to respond to that area of Fremont. Confirmed sightings as of this morning at Fremont, and I think there has been reported that there was at least a Mom speaking family, Mayan indigenous Mayan Mom speakers, who had their door knocked. So ASILEP and other community-based organizations were there trying to provide as many resources as they could, and trying to provide them now in Maya Mom, right? Which is, if anyone knows anything about the way, I don't know if this is the case for Maya Mom, but there are certain indigenous languages that aren't in written form, and so you have to do often video translation or just have audio or visual materials. I don't think that's the case for Maya Mom, but I could be mistaken. But they tend to rely heavily on audio visual resources and materials. So that just provides another challenge, right, in terms of getting resources to those folks. So as of yet, we haven't heard much activity going on in the city of Hayward itself. There have been some sightings just based on the local rapid response network here in this part of the East Bay. I believe the Hayward Community Coalition put a post on their social media when there was an unmarked vehicle sighted or spotted in, I want to say, gosh, I'm blanking. It was at a gas station, though. I want to say Soto, maybe somewhere
Yeah,
in
Soto and
Hayward,
Tennyson.
Soto and Tennyson, where it appeared that it was two federal agents that attempted to use the gas station to change, or the facilities at the gas station. They were denied, and so the photo was captured of those folks. American-made vehicle from out of state plates. Usually, a pretty good tell is the American vehicle with either out-of-state plates or non-California plates. It's usually a good way to tell who it is. But that's sort of the current situation with ICE in our communities. As of yet, no real presence, or at least no heavy presence. There is presence. Folks are sort of being picked up, but it seems to be one-offs. There's a lot of folks, at least from my perspective, who's kind of I've been on the ground a little bit. There's a lot of calls for folks to respond to what might be ICE presence. A lot of them sort of tend to be false alarms, because I think people are really scared, and people are sort of saying they're seeing in any vehicle or seeing any law enforcement person who might be wearing more tactical gear, and they're like, oh, that must be ICE, right? And so they call it in. So there's been a couple occasions now where folks have responded, haven't really seen much, or haven't or arrived there and there's nothing really there, right? Or it's the wrong police agency, or it's not the wrong, not ICE, it's another police agency. And so the good thing is that there's people that are activated, that are watching what's happening, and that are ready to respond if ICE decides to show up in Hayward, right? So that's sort of the ongoing situation around immigration, ICE raids in, at least in Hayward, right? I haven't heard much of any other cities in the East Bay. All of the reporting seems to cover like most of the activity in the Bay Area happening at courthouses. So people are showing up for their cases, and ICE is there waiting for them, which is, crazy to think about. But yeah, that's the ongoing situation.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think the hardest part right now is that because there hasn't been, I mean, I feel like it's one of those moments where it's almost like a terror tactic, where you don't necessarily, you're not seeing anything happen, but there's always the threat of something happening. And I know that's been impacting a lot of people in our community, that like certain community events have been canceled or way down in attendance. Different places have been shut down. I know I walk past a place pretty regularly that does the those big grills that they do for the street vendors who do grilling. And it's like, usually I'll walk past there in the morning and there'll be like, 8 or 10 dudes there, and they're all like getting ready for the day. And for the last, I don't know, like month or two, there's just been nobody there. It's just been all shut up. So I think there's definitely an effect, unfortunately. And it's just, even though people haven't been coming around and getting seized, which, I mean, thank goodness, but it's the fear, I think, is really still there. And that's really unfortunate, because I mean, people don't deserve to live that way.
Yeah, I think just to sort of piggyback, the weekend of what was supposed to be the major sort of operation in the Bay Area, I was doing some outreach at my local Home Depot, and talking to one of the vendors there. She was like, yeah, it's quiet, super quiet. It's not usually this quiet. There's no one out. So they must have heard word. And I spoke to some of the workers who were, and she was, it's really funny because she was on top of it. She was like, yeah, here's this news article I'm reading. And she's like, I'm on this WhatsApp channel. And so it was good to,
That's
it was
awesome.
sort of like, encouraging to hear that she was connected. Some of the other workers I spoke to were not as connected. Some were a little bit more skeptical and were sort of saying like, well, have you seen them? Have you seen these ICE agents? Because until I'm like, basically saying I'll believe it when I see it, sort of thing. So, it's unfortunate too, because those folks, they're like, life doesn't really change for me. I have to keep working. Even the fear is there, but it's like, if you succumb to the fear, then I also have to provide food on the table. So it's sort of that's the kind of place a lot of people are in also, where they have to make ends meet still, and so they still got to work, and it's unfortunate. So I'll try my best to, as I'm on doing things on the ground, we might have little updates for over the loudspeaker, the media content here. We'll try to provide updates and let folks know what's going on with our community.
Nestor, you know what this means?
Please,
we need a new. No, we need a new segment name, and it's got to have its own little like splash screen or banner.
Oh yeah, shoot!
I
forgot I love my segments. Yeah, you're right. Oh my god, how can
it's a
I
new
forget
segment
that?
now?
Yeah, we have a new segment on the street reporting. Yeah, we'll have to figure out what that segment is. But guess what? I think we've made it to the end of our episode. Do we have anything else to talk about tonight?
You set the agenda, man. I do the headlines. The rest is on you.
We're 40 minutes in. I think we had a great first episode back in season 2. I'm going to call the season 2 episode 1. Colin, where can the wonderful people of Hayward and the Bay Area, because I'm sure we have folks listening in from all over, where can they find you? What should they be looking at? Give us a little plug here.
Yeah, so you can always find our content online at the Hayward Herald Substack right now, haywardherald.substack.com. We're also at Hayward Herald on Instagram, and you can find us at the Hayward Herald YouTube channel here, which is where you are right now, hopefully. And yeah, you can always reach out. You can email if you have any information you'd like to share, anything you'd like to talk about, any suggestions or comments, you want to shout at me about something, you can do that all the time. I'm very responsive, except to people who are angry for no reason. I'm not going to respond to those people. But if you have nice things to say, I'm more than happy to say thank you.
Yeah, say some nice things to Colin. He does a lot of work to bring you good people the news and make sure that you're well informed and have everything you might need to be that informed citizen, right? This is what democracy has promised us: independent news media that provides us all with the information we need to make the right decisions.
Absolutely. And do me one more favor. Tell us below in the comments how much you missed over the loudspeaker.
Oh my God. If they do that, it'll spark a new life in me. I'll be able to produce twofold of what I've producing before, which is, it'll be a lot. Thanks for checking us out. You can find me on social media, and this comes out through the Hayward Herald. You can find me there. I occasionally write my own stuff. You can find me on Substack as well. But thanks for tuning in. We're back, Colin. We're officially back.
We're back, baby.